Today is Hevron Day, and this is today's flag parade between Kiryat Arba and Hevron. Remember, the biblical city of Hevron has a second name, Kiryat Arba, and today's Jewish community of Kiryat Arba is right next to the biblical and modern city of Hevron. Yesterday was Jerusalem Day, celebrating the miraculous liberation of Jerusalem in June 1967, and the day after the IDF liberated Jerusalem, they then drove to Hevron and liberated Hevron, as well as the whole Judea and Samaria area. But the liberation of Hevron is an unbelievably surprising story with a bittersweet ending. Yes, we liberated it, but not as we should have. Now, before I go into more of the details and the meaning of this whole story for us today, I just want to remind you that if you think the videos we make as proud Judean Jews telling you the politically incorrect truth about everything, then just click the donate button to support our work every once in a while. Okay, now back to the story of the liberation of Hevron. So, on that fateful day following the liberation of Jerusalem from the illegally occupying Jordanian forces, the IDF chief rabbi, Rav Goren, drove on that road that you see behind me that connects Jerusalem to Hevron with his driver, wanting to be there in Hevron behind the IDF troops as they went to fight the Jordanian army there in Hevron. As Rav Goren approached Hevron with his driver, they passed through the Hevron suburb of Chalchul. At the top of the hill of Chalchul, flying from the minaret, was a Jordanian flag. Because at that time, in 1967, there was no Arab people called Palestinians, and they didn't have a flag. So upon seeing the Jordanian flag, Rav Goren said to his driver, "I suppose the trips missed that flag," making his driver climb up the minaret to take the Jordanian flag down. Minutes later, they then arrived at a very empty city of Hevron, seeing white flags flying from the windows. As Rav Goren arrived alone at the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, only with his driver, he drew the flag of Israel on a white sheet, climbed up the minaret on top of the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs to fly the Israeli flag above Hevron, which he thought the IDF had already conquered, that he came after them. What Rav Goren did not know was that not only was Hevron empty of Jordanian soldiers, but it was also empty of many of the local Arab Muslim residents, and also empty of IDF soldiers, because he and his driver arrived there in Hevron before the IDF even got there. You see, the Jordanian army and many of the local Arab Muslim residents of Hevron ran away without waiting for the IDF to come. No shot was fired. And that's how Hevron was liberated. But the story does not end there. A senior IDF officer then arrived on the scene at the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs. He said to Rav Goren, "Get that shmata rag off of there," referring to the homemade Israeli flag that Rav Goren made and flew over the tomb. But Rav Goren refused, indicating to the officer that the city was now in Israeli hands, so of course the Israeli flag should fly there. The soldier was insistent. The Rav, a higher rank, stood his ground, adamant. But then the soldier went up and took the flag down. This is an IDF soldier. And he folded it and put it into the back of his Jeep. He then drove off to IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv, but he actually never arrived as he was killed in a car accident on the road. But that's not it. The reason the Jordanians and many of the Hevron residents ran away even before the IDF arrived was because they were scared to death of the IDF troops. You have to understand, this is the Middle East, folks. The Arabs believe that their opponents will be as vicious to them as they would be to the others. So when they talk about annihilating all the Jews, they think we would do the same to them. So they ran. If only the story ended there, Hevron today would be a re-energized ancestral Jewish city bustling with Jews once again. But unfortunately, IDF Chief of Staff Moshe Dayan ran after the Arab Muslims from Hevron who ran away and begged them to return. And he promised them that they would be safe and that they could continue being responsible for the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs. And he literally returned the keys to the tomb back to them after they had given the keys to him and to Rav Goren first, because they saw that the Jews liberated the city and the Jordanians were no longer in charge. Now remember, it was also this same chief of staff of the IDF, Moshe Dayan, who stupidly gave the keys to the Temple Mount, our holiest site, back to the Muslims as well after we liberated Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. And here, once again, he returned the keys to our holy site back to the Muslims. First the Temple Mount, and then to the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, instead of allowing the Jewish state of Israel to have full responsibility and sovereignty over our holy sites. Now understand, what then IDF Chief of Staff Dayan, the Israeli leadership then, and much of the Israeli leadership today still prefers to ignore is that we are involved in a religious conflict, not a territorial one. Had we, the Jewish state of Israel, kept the Temple Mount and the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs in our hands back in 1967 after we miraculously won that war, then our conflict today with the Arab Muslims would be on a much lower flame, because they would have realized the Jews are back and in control because the Jews are acting like proud Jews, taking responsibility for their holy sites. But we didn't do that. So what do we see? The Jewish people weren't yet ready back in 1967 to be truly sovereign over our holy places and act as a true sovereign in our ancestral and eternal homeland. And that type of leadership still continues today. The truth is that today we are still not ready. The Jewish people in Israel today are in the middle of a fundamental religious, indigenous wake-up process to return to the identity we are supposed to be, to the people we are supposed to be, for the benefit of ourselves and for the benefit of all who live with us. We were 2,000 years of exile. We have forgotten what it's like to be our own people in our homeland. Understand, I do not have a problem with our Muslim enemies. I have a problem with my fellow Jews and Israelis who ignore that Islam, with many Muslims, but not all, have with us Jews as being sovereign in our ancestral homeland. They don't want us to be here at all, and they're trying everything they can to get us out of here. They see where we sometimes, and many of the times, we act as foreigners and not as the true sovereigns. They want to get rid of us. We ourselves are the ultimate problem, not understanding our situation. And because we, and I mean our political, lay, organizational, and even rabbinic leadership, all misdiagnose our conflict with our Arab Muslim neighbors, thinking that it's territorial conflict, that then gives room to the evil powers within the Muslim world to erroneously believe that they will defeat us and destroy the Jewish state of Israel, because they see they are weak, they see we do not stand up for ourselves, we do not protect our holy sites, we do not stop their evil in order to truly stop it, and hence they continue and grow in their motivation to continue killing us and destroying the state of Israel. But I want to remind all of you, everything we're going through, this process, it's all good. The wake-up process is in high gear. We, the Jewish people, indigenous to our homeland, back as sovereign, will be victorious, because the Jewish people in the land of Israel are waking up. And those Arab Muslims who know how blessed they are to live under the sovereignty of the Jewish state of Israel, well, they will be blessed ultimately when we return to ourselves as truly acting as the indigenous sovereign. With regards to the rest of the Arab Muslims who do not know how blessed they are to live with us, and they continue to support and incite killing us and destroying Israel, well, ultimately, they will run away and not be asked to return this time. So everybody, happy Hevron Day.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.